Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting for April 24th. We welcome all those that are in attendance this evening here in council chambers, those that are watching at home on GMTV or maybe streaming live as well. We apologize, we're a bit tardy, went a little bit long in executive session. This evening, our invocation, well, before that, just a few things, some points of matter. We do have agendas that are printed, and you can pick those up outside in People Street. We do have a portion of the agenda known as Citizens to be Heard. You can fill out a sheet. I have several this evening. Turn that in to our city clerk, and we will acknowledge you during that portion of the agenda. That's item number 8. This evening, we actually do not have a consent agenda, and later in the meeting, item number 11 will be the opportunity for a public hearing. Now, this evening, invocation will be led by Tony Fisher, and Alderman Forrest Owens will lead us in the pledge. Please rise.
Please bow your heads. Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of city business. Be with the board in their deliberations and help them to be wise in their decisions. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. It's in your name I pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Before we set the agenda for this evening, which is item number 4, I would like to recognize some folks that are here in attendance this evening. We have Stephanie Brockway, Executive Director for the Germantown Education Foundation, is here. I believe I spotted a couple of school board members, Betsy Landers and Linda Fisher, our school board chair. Hope I did not overlook another school board member. Quit moving your head, and Lisa Parker as well. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have Boy Scout Troop 74 from Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church that's here this evening to see a lesson in civics. With that said, we have approval of the agenda this evening. There is no consent agenda. There were no modifications made earlier. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented to the public?
Move to approve.
There's
Second.
a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, Mayor. As I mentioned in the executive session, there's a few things that I would like added to the agenda. One of those things that I'm just reminded with the number of people that we have in the audience tonight, I think we should consider allowing our aldermen to respond to comments from the audience. Just so you'll know, I will not respond to any comment from the audience tonight that are directed at me. I don't want anyone to perceive this as something I'm doing for myself. I think it's important to have some engagement with the audience. And again, if we add this to the agenda for consideration, no matter what's said about me here tonight or about issues that are important to me, I will not respond to those comments. So that's something I would like added to the agenda tonight. And there are a few other things. Do you want to address them one at a time, or do you want me to go through them?
The standard in a typical meeting is there's been a motion and there's been a second. If you'd like to make an amendment, you can do so at this time.
An amendment to the agenda, yes. I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda tonight to add. Well, let me clarify. Do you want me to go through all of my motions and then come back and make the amendments, or do you want to have the discussion about all of my motions now, or do you want me to make individual
in executive
requests?
session, you seem to mention a litany of different items. It would be good and appropriate if you were to make an amendment to address each one of those.
Okay.
That way they can be taken on a singular basis.
Okay. Well, what I would like to do then is to allow for the rules to permit us to respond to comments from the audience. And whether or not that really is an amendment, I don't know. I don't believe it is. I think it's a change of our rules.
We're setting the agenda this evening, sir, and so that's what's the topic right now. So you have an amendment. Did you prepare that in writing for us?
To change the rules for tonight so that we could,
Generally, when an amendment or something is brought forward, or a resolution is brought forward in writing, the chairman then rereads it into the minutes. So if you'd like to state your amendment, there's been a motion and a second, and you've brought forth an amendment. If you'd like to restate it, your amendment number 1.
Make a motion, is what you're asking him to do.
State your amendment, make it in the form of a motion.
I'd like to move that we allow the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to respond to comments from the audience during our
Citizens to be heard.
citizens to be heard.
Alderman Yonda, that's a friendly amendment, I take it? Okay, the motion on the table, we have a motion to set the agenda. We have an amendment, a motion to amend the motion to allow citizens to be engaged or in citizens to be heard. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
The amended motion fails. We currently have a motion on the table to approve the agenda as presented to the public.
I have another motion I'd like to make. I would also like to move this body to allow us to start recording our executive sessions. We actually do some deliberating during those executive sessions. There's no public record of that session, so I'd like to make a motion that we start allowing the recording of our executive sessions.
It's been a motion to tape the executive sessions of the Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting. There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Could I have a little bit of clarification on that?
Yeah, a little.
If I am not necessarily opposed to the recording of the executive session. What my concern is as was pointed out by our city administrator in the last meeting, is dumping a lot more work on our staff that is already at maximum capacity. I would be amenable to recording the session so long as we didn't have to draft minutes of that same meeting. And so if there was ever, I guess, an issue, then I suppose we'd go back to the tape and review that.
I'll agree to that.
I don't.
There's been a proper motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Wait a minute. Then we'll do the amendment to the amendment.
I didn't hear that in the form of amendment. I think the alderman made just a statement for the future, in essence. Take this under more study. Alderman Owens?
Well, I think we need some agreement going forward that we are going to start recording these executive sessions. Now, if we need to discuss whether or not we're going to have the written minutes, then we should probably go ahead and have that discussion now rather than later.
Well, we've had a motion and a second. You have to vote on this. And then we probably should need to come back and say, hey, I'm okay with this recording, but we don't have to have it written in minutes.
Yeah, let me point out one thing as preference from the chair. Let me ask our city attorney, typically when we look at bringing forth something to the public without it being published, properly published and put on the agenda, I think MTAS has written that it's wise to, in essence, take this up at a future meeting, the next meeting. Is that a practice, or is that part of any type of statute?
Yeah. Attorney Harris, I think the goal is to put this on the agenda, have the discussion about whether or not we're going to have the executive sessions recorded in the future, but I think the deliberations should occur tonight. The goal is to set that on the agenda to be heard so that the public can actually hear the deliberations.
That would be up to who they decide whether to do it tonight or your motion.
Well, I don't think I can make a motion at this time for us to actually vote on whether or not we're going to allow the clerk to record the minutes in the executive session. I think that would have to come in the discussion once we've added this to the minutes tonight, or to the agenda tonight. Is that not correct?
It could unfold as the discussion occurs with regard to the agenda item, if it goes on the agenda, as to how to do it. And you might consider the responsibility for tonight as opposed to 2 weeks.
Well, I brought it up at the executive session last time, and there was nothing ever came of it, and so that's why I'm having to bring it up again tonight, because it was essentially ignored. Well, go ahead. Tell us. No, you're not interrupting. I mean, I want some clarification on this point, and I want your legal guidance as to the proper way to bring forth this amendment. I'm fine as having it as a rule change and everyone agreeing to it and saying that the clerk going forward will approve these minutes or will record the minutes of the executive session. I'm okay with that if we can do it that way.
May I offer a friendly amendment then? In order to have this fully published on an agenda, why don't we move this to the next BMA meeting, put it on the agenda formally tonight that it will be put on, and we'll have that discussion at that time. I don't think 2 weeks is going to prohibit anything. We'll be able to have full discussion at that time, and it will be properly posted.
Can we amend the rules tonight to allow this session to be? Well, we've already gone through the executive session, so it doesn't do any good. Yeah, that's fine. I don't have a problem with Alderman Owen's suggestion. So if we want to put it on the agenda for the next meeting, I'm okay with that.
That was my question to the city attorney a moment ago.
Can you turn on your microphone?
Well, I guess the problem is, though, when we get here for the next executive session, if we haven't had the vote tonight, then we'll be going through this same process again, just like we did tonight. I asked for the executive session to be recorded again tonight. It wasn't. And so we'll be placed back in the same situation at the next meeting where we may have another executive session that doesn't get recorded.
Well, it will, once it's decided, then they will be subsequently. So it's just a matter of rules of motion and
Right.
and
So now
taking action.
Now I understand your motion to be to add to the, it's a motion to add to the agenda the recording of the executive session, and you're asking that it be heard at the next BMA meeting.
Well, if we can't hear it tonight, yes, but I think I'd like an agreement from the body tonight that we will record the next executive session, and then we'll take the vote. So it's just basically, I guess it'll be a suspension of the rules to allow for that the very next executive session to be recorded, and then we'll take the vote that night.
Well, tonight we are not crafting policy. Tonight we're setting an agenda. There's currently been a motion. There's been good dialogue and good discussion, but there's currently a motion and a second, and a roll call can be taken. Correct.
Well, wait. No, this is
To
a
put it
motion
on the agenda.
This is a motion to add to tonight's agenda consideration of recording the executive sessions in the future.
That's correct.
And you're asking that it be heard on the May 8th BMA meeting.
Well, I asked for it to be heard tonight, and then I agreed to Alderman Owen's amendment to have it heard on May 8th.
Okay, I think we got that. There probably needs to be a second to that, since that's all inclusive.
Second.
Vice Mayor, did you have something?
I would just like a point of clarification for what this amendment is. Alderman Massey, could you state your amendment?
Sure. Like to make a motion tonight to amend the agenda to agree that at our next meeting, we will take a vote. Yeah, now it's complicated. Attorney Harris, the goal is to get this on the, what I intended originally was to have it heard tonight. I've agreed to Alderman Owen's amendment to have it heard on May 8th now. So how do we incorporate Alderman Owen's amendment to my amendment at this point and accomplish what we need accomplished?
All right, let's back up.
He can withdraw the amendment that he made and make a new amendment, could he not?
That would be fine. He could withdraw the motion and make another motion to amend. Would you like to try that?
Well, we're actually amending the agenda for the next meeting now, though I think it's part of the problem.
Well, no. What you have before you is a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Right.
You've made a motion to amend tonight's agenda to include an item. And that item is to consider at the next meeting on May the 8th a motion to record the executive session.
So we're agreeing as a body that we're going to place that on the next agenda, correct?
Well, you're going to vote on that later. Right now, you're just voting on the tonight's agenda portion of it.
Okay.
Did I recite that correctly?
I think that's fair.
Okay. So is there a second? I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, you're in charge.
The motion has been stated into the record and agreed upon by the person filing it. Is there a second?
Second.
We're voting on the executive session being recorded and taking it up on May the 8th.
Yep.
Just make note of that, and we'll get it cleaned up.
Motion by Alderman Maskey, and a second.
By Alderman Owens. Please call the roll.
Alderman Barcena,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson,
Yes.
Alderman Maskey,
Yes.
Alderman Owen,
Yes.
Alderman Young.
That's a yes somehow. Yeah, there we go.
As mentioned earlier, there was a motion to adopt the agenda as presented and seconded.
I have one more item, Mayor, and this one hopefully won't take as long as the last one. I think that we need to have a discussion tonight about your authority to serve on the school board's negotiating team. I mentioned earlier why I think it's appropriate. I think this body is where you get your authority. Whether it comes down on one side or the other is not for me to decide, but I think that each of the aldermen should go on the record as saying that it's okay for you to serve on that body. Otherwise, we get a situation where we have other governmental bodies delegating authority to the city. Well, that can work the other way too, where you have a committee that is formed and then they try to delegate authority to other bodies. And so I would like to have that heard tonight, so I'm going to make a motion that we amend the agenda to allow for a period of discussion on that, and hopefully we'll be able to have some motions, one way or the other, regarding the proper legal authority for any city official to have delegated authority of some other governmental body. So that's what I'd like to do tonight, is just make a motion that we add to the agenda tonight a discussion of whether or not the mayor has approval of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to serve on the negotiating team for the school board regarding our heritage schools.
That's been brought forth in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Alderman Maskey,
Yes.
Alderman Owens,
As stated previously this evening, I believe that the school board has already voted on this issue. I believe that we have no less than 2 legal opinions stating that we are in the right, or the school board is in the right to do so, and I believe that this is politically motivated, and so I vote no.
I do think this is politically motivated. I don't understand why anybody wouldn't want both the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the school board to work together. Obviously, this is important for the people that are going to be spending the money to be part of the negotiations, and I also understand that the mayor is the one that actually brought us to the table here during these new negotiations. So I vote no also.
Yes?
In executive session, I expressed concern over a resolution that Alderman Massey had brought forward on the 10th. I feel that for our board to be asked to negate an action of the Board of Education, it shows a gross lack of respect for them. And I believe that we should spend our time wisely in support of the team that is seeking to acquire our heritage schools.
Well, a point of clarification.
Sir?
The vote's been
We are
cast.
voting, and I vote no.
Well, Alderman Gibson didn't understand the amendment.
Excuse me, Alderman Massey, have you called all the roll,
Yes,
clerk? Okay. The question has been settled. Okay. There's also a motion on the table to approve the agenda as presented, and it was properly seconded. Please call the roll to set the agenda for this evening.
Alderman Owens? Yes. Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Thank you. The agenda has been set for this evening. That takes us to item number 5, approval of the minutes from the April 10th, 2017 meeting. In executive session, there were no modifications or corrections to the minutes. Are there any this evening?
None, Mayor.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Minutes have been approved. That takes us to special recognition this evening. We've got 4 distinct items, 2 of them education-related, 1 beautification, and 1 recognizing one of our fire chiefs. The first 2 are both education-related, and Vice Mayor Gibson will take care of those. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could ask members of the Education Commission to come forward. Mr. Steve Chandler is here, and I believe Stephanie Brockway is as well. And our Teacher of the Month, Mr. Clay Davis, if you'll come forward as well. It is an honor for the Germantown Education Commission to present the May 2017 Teacher of the Month Award to Mr. Clay Davis. As an algebra teacher at Germantown High School, Mr. Davis is committed to ensuring his students have every opportunity to master the subject. While some educators lament the lack of math skills new students bring with them at the beginning of a new year, Mr. Davis uses an innovative process for bringing students up to speed. Using an array of online and software-based programs to diagnose and remediate struggling students, Mr. Davis is able to quickly prepare students for the content of his class. He also turned coaching duties over to another faculty member so that he can spend more time in after-school tutoring. And when he tutors, he welcomes all students, not just his own. Mr. Davis brings to his profession a careful balance of high demands for students and a personal commitment and care to meet them where they are academically and grow them to where they need to be. His commitment contributes significantly to Germantown High School being the top-ranking Shelby County school for the Algebra 1 Tennessee Ready test. Well done. Mr. Davis, please accept our appreciation for your commitment to Germantown students. Your award is sponsored by Principal Toyota. Thank you. And if I could ask our 2017 Youth Excellence Award winner for the month of May, Miss Amelia Barron, to please come forward. The May 2017 Youth Excellence Award is presented to Amelia Barron, a senior at Houston High School. Determined, intellectually curious, conscientious, independent, and natural leader are 5 powerful traits that describe Amelia. She has poured herself into her academics, her writing, her school activities, and her community involvement for the last several years. Amelia is highly intelligent, capable, and personable. She combines a high grade point average in challenging courses and outstanding test scores, with many achievements in extracurricular activities. However, it is Amelia's humble approach to school and social settings that really set her apart. She is constantly considering others and their needs and abilities. Academics are a #1 priority for Amelia, which is clear from her excellent academic record. She is a conscientious student who is really interested in learning. She has had many opportunities to be a peer tutor, lead projects, groups, and class discussions. Amelia's teachers report that she is intellectually curious, disciplined, mature, and focused. She is an avid reader, loves to write, and has a special gift for the sciences. She has attended many summer learning opportunities, participated in internships, and been able to travel extensively with her family. Her high academic achievement has also earned her membership into the National Honor Society, the National Beta Club, National Spanish Honor Society, and Rho Kappa Social Studies Honor Academy. This year, she was recognized as an AP Scholar with distinction and is a National Merit Commended Scholar. Let's take a moment for me to catch my breath and for a little applause. There's more. Outside of academics, Amelia has found many ways to express her creativity. She has been a member of the Houston High Choir since her freshman year, and this year is the prose editor of Houston High's award-winning literary magazine, Avatar. Amelia loves to serve others and take the opportunity to do so whenever she can. As a member of the Environmental Club, ACT 30 and Above Club, and other organizations, she has volunteered 40-plus hours a year tutoring her peers, beautifying the campus, and helping with fundraisers. Last year, she founded the Beyond Boundaries Club at Houston to help educate others about different cultures and to encourage diversity and tolerance, and is serving as the president this year. The future students of Houston High will enjoy and benefit from her efforts for years to come. In recognition of her commitment to excellence, the Germantown Education Commission is proud to present Amelia Barron with the Germantown Youth Excellence Award.
We're going to let Vice Mayor Gibson catch her breath for a moment because she actually has the Beautification Commission Business Award as well. And I just wanted to, on behalf of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, congratulate our Teacher of the Month and our Student of the Month for shining achievements and great examples for both being a student and being a teaching professional. So congratulations again from the city and from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Is that enough time to catch your breath, Vice Mayor?
I think so.
All right.
I think so. If I could ask our Beautification Commission member, Ms. Natalie Williams, to come forward, as well as the Shops of Saddle Creek. Ken, thank you for being here. The Shops of Saddle Creek, owned by Trademark Property Company, is one of Germantown's premier retail outlets and a focal point for the city. The Shops of Saddle Creek opened in 1987 and is widely known as the first lifestyle center developed in the U.S. Major redevelopment, expansion, and renovations during the past few years have positioned Saddle Creek as one of the Southeast's most productive upscale shopping destinations. An additional 20,000 square feet for restaurants and retail space, remodeled building facades, upgrades to the plazas, public art, lighting, signage, wayfinding, and beautiful landscaping have given the Shops of Saddle Creek a whole new look. This property was selected by the Beautification Commission to receive the April Beautification Award by a unanimous vote. The level of landscape detail, maintenance, and care of the property at this Germantown retail outlet demonstrates pride in their appearance and their commitment to helping the city look beautiful. The Beautification Commission expressed much appreciation to the Shops of Saddle Creek for the efforts. And so it is with great pleasure we do announce the Shops of Saddle Creek as the April Beautification Commission Award.
Mayor, if I could, I'd like
Sure.
to add that Mr. Taylor also did a great job during the holiday season. That it was incredible, and you continue every month in and month out making that a beautiful place, and we appreciate that here in Germantown.
Well stated, Alderman Yonda. And Kenneth, I know you haven't been there the whole 30 years, but it seems like it. I know we've worked together for at least 15 plus years with the Shops of Saddle Creek. Thank you for keeping up the good work. Thank you. Takes us to item 6D on the agenda, special recognition, Executive Fire Officer, Chief Selberg.
Thank you, Mayor and Alderman. The National Fire Academy offers an elite program for senior fire officials called the Executive Fire Officer Program, or EFO. This is a 4-year program that includes attending 2 weeks each year and successfully completing 4 applied research projects. Having taken this program myself, I know how difficult those projects can be and how tough they're graded. The Executive Fire Officer Program provides senior officials with a broad range of the administrative and operations knowledge needed for today's fire service. Students must complete courses in executive development, executive analysis of community risk reduction, executive analysis of fire service operations and emergency management, and executive leadership. Administrative Chief Keith Saunders recently completed the Executive Fire Officer Program and attended graduation at the National Fire Academy this past weekend. The completion of this great program speaks highly of Chief Saunders' dedication to personal development and serving the citizens of Germantown. He joins the ranks of only a handful of fire chiefs across the state that have achieved this prestigious accomplishment. It is my honor to present Chief Saunders with this Executive Fire Officer certificate.
Hey, Dad, don't you need to get a little bit closer?
As pictures are being taken, I'd like to ask Big Keith and Mrs. Saunders to come forward and have a picture made with both chiefs. I think it'd be very appropriate. Big Keith has been a volunteer in our city for years and years and serves on our commissions. And you dressed up tonight. No. Well, Keith Sr. and Keith Jr., maybe I should have put it that way. Thank you, Chiefs. Truly a family that serves together in this community. Very nice moment this evening. That takes us to item number 7 on our agenda, and this is generally where I make the statement. If you are here for special recognition as a teacher or as a student or anything else, you may leave now and enjoy dinner, or you can stay with the Boy Scouts and enjoy some civic responsibility and seeing how things are done here at the city. As people clear out, Alderman liaison reports, we go from position 1 to position 3. Aldermen give their activity at their commissions and boards each month and try to do so in a quick, succinct manner. Alderman Barzizza.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one report, and that is in regards to last Thursday's event that we had over at the oh my God. Well, anyway, the senior commission had I wasn't prepared. Had their spring event, and Bill Stevens from CERT, Ron Childers from WMC TV5 did an emergency response event and was incredibly well attended. And both Mr. Childers as well as Mr. Stevens had an incredible, it's almost a 3-hour event. And the people thoroughly enjoyed it, and we also provided lunch for the attendees. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Vice Mayor Gibson.
Thank you, Mayor. The Neighborhood Preservation celebrated their annual tour of remodeled homes and landscaping yesterday. It did showcase recently renovated or landscaped properties where the homeowner was there with their contractor to answer any questions that they might have. I would like to say a special thank you to staff and to commission members. Dory Sims is here. Margaret Owens is here. The work of the commission, I can simply say they are a joy to work with. Each member contributes with enthusiasm and interest for life and for all of the work that was put in. Chairman Allison Avra and the entire commission, we do thank you for giving us that day. I do want to thank the homeowners who graciously opened their homes this year, Ms. Dare Eastock, Debbie and Chuck Booker, Wendy Robson, and Andy Pouncey. Our tour sponsors this year were the West Tennessee Home Builders Remodelers Council, Aaron Wadlington, real estate attorney here locally, Allison Avra with Crylike Realtors, Main Street Decor at the Norwalk Design Center, E-Box and Eplex, and Holiday Flowers and Events. A wonderful tour again in the little bit of a drizzle, but it was very well attended. The Education Commission did meet last week, and preparations for the Education Celebration this Thursday, April 27th, are in full swing. The annual Education Celebration recognizes achievements of teachers and youth in Germantown. The Commission will present the new Teacher of the Year Award, the Marjorie Reapy Memorial Teacher of the Year Award, and the Youth Excellence Scholarship Award. And that's my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Alderman, position 3.
The Public Safety Education Commission asked me to remind citizens in conjunction with the Germantown Police Department and the DEA, we will once again be sponsoring a drug take-back this Saturday, April 29th. The event will take place at the Kroger on Farmington, as well as the Target located at Forest Hill between the hours of 10 o'clock a.m. and 2 o'clock p.m. We ask our citizens to bring in your expired prescription medications. They'll take those back and they'll dispose of those. Some of the things that we cannot take in will be any type of aerosol, liquids, needles, or sharp objects. So basically, the only thing we can take is pills and patches. I think my chair is here. I want to make sure, is there anything that I left out that I need to add? Okay, so please come out. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Alderman Owens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The Parks and Recreation Commission will hold their April meeting this Thursday, and it will be at 5:30, and it's in conjunction with the Oaklawn Garden Arboretum opening that begins at 4 p.m. The Tennessee Nature Conservancy Board of Directors is the co-host of this event, and if you would like more details about this, you can get in contact with our Parks Department, Pam Beasley, in the Parks and Recreation Office. That's my report.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Yonda.
Thank you, Mayor. Turn it on. Okay, thus we had a Financial Advisory Commission. We reviewed the FY18 Germantown Municipal School District's funding. It was approved by the FAC. It's actually a pretty quick meeting. They had it all well planned. Amnesty Day, the Environmental Commission. I don't see any Environmental Commission people here, but it was on Saturday in the rain. They're probably all home sick, but the whole week, it was unbelievable. We had, in our location at Johnson Road, we had 876 vehicles, I believe. We filled up 2 of the shredders and had to turn away about 100 people that had boxes to shred, so it was extremely successful in the rain. I'm very pleased with the Environmental Commission's volunteering, especially Public Works, because they come out there on their day off and work with all that, and it was raining the whole time. I appreciate them very much, and we'll have another one in September.
Thank you, Alderman Yonda. And quickly from the Mayor's office, just a few announcements. The first edition of Go Germantown magazine is scheduled to be published on April 28th, and that'll occur 3 times a year and be mailed to each Germantown home. This more or less takes the place of FYI, and it's a little bit more robust than that. I'd like to thank Executive Director Stephanie Brockway, who's here, for a very successful GMSD 5K Stampede and Color Run yesterday. I'd like to thank city staff from Parks and Rec, General Services, Police, Fire, for making sure the race and the Food Truck Festival and just the festival atmosphere went out without a hitch. Also, I'd like to recognize that Officer Ben Sharp was promoted to the rank of lieutenant here recently, and we congratulate him. In addition, the library just concluded a very successful Battle of the Books that went very well and attracted over 225 youth participated, and it was all across the state as well. And to mark your calendar, GPAC's Peanut Butter and Jam Series presents PBJ Picnic with Farmer Jason on Saturday, May 6th in the Grove, so bring a picnic blanket and your kids, and that'll be something fun for the entire family. So that concludes Alderman Liaison reports for this meeting. That takes us to citizens to be heard. We had several people fill out sheets this evening. When I call your name, if you could come to either one of the podiums, and you will state your name and address with zip code for the record. Some of the guidelines for citizens to be heard. Citizens to be heard is designed to gain input from the public and not for immediate responses by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. The intent of this agenda item is to provide the public a platform to be thoughtfully heard and not a forum for dialogue, discussion, or verbal exchange with the board. While the board cannot assure each speaker of a specific or individualized future response, the board will consider the public comments and any supporting materials provided by the speaker. Public comments should be limited to 3 minutes per resident. Speakers must clearly state their name, address, and if any of the subject matter. Speakers may offer objective comments. Speakers are asked to refrain from using names of personnel or names of persons connected with the city, particularly when lodging a complaint. Speakers will not be permitted to engage in gossip, hearsay, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. The presiding board chair shall have sole authority to terminate the remarks of any individual who is disruptive or does not adhere to board rules. With that stated, the first speaker is Marlene Struby. Ms. Struby, if you could come forward and state your name and address and zip code for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Marlene Struby, 7642 Foster Ridge, Germantown, Tennessee, 38138. I stand before you, and I'll make this quick, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I stand before you, and I make a request of all of you to seriously consider that a better offer be made for GES and GMS. A very large amount of taxpayer money has been committed to build a new elementary school. One, that amount of money would go a long way to make a good offer to get 2 schools. I know that we're in difficult position in the schools. We already need 1. We're almost needing 2. So please consider a larger offer. I would also think that it would be quite prudent to your fiduciary responsibility to do so. I also want to thank Alderman Massey. I didn't know he was going to make that motion tonight. I have been here a lot. I know you know me. Over the last 10 years, off and on. And a gentleman that came and sat beside me said he couldn't hear much of anything that you said at the executive committee meeting. I agree with him. That's why I'm standing here. That's what prompted me to come here, is because I've been sitting here multiple nights not being able to hear a lot of times half or more of what is being said during the executive committee meeting. And in the interest of sunshine, that needs to be recorded so that if you can't hear it, you can go listen to it later. If you're like, well, what were they talking about? I need to understand this. So in that interest, I would ask that when it goes on the agenda, that you would all vote to have it recorded. People are interested. They can't always make it here, but they really are interested. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Struby. Next speaker for citizens to be heard, Natalie Williams. If you could come forth to one of the podiums and state your name and address with zip code for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Natalie Williams, 8049 Neshoba Road, 38138. Good evening, Board and Mayor and City Administration. Mr. Harris and Chief Hall, thank you for affording me the opportunity to speak. I have the honor to work with the Germantown Education Foundation this year, and I am chairing the Treasures for Teachers event. And as an educator myself of 21 years, I could not be more honored to take this on behalf of our teachers in the Germantown schools. I know how much it means to a teacher to have additional money to furnish your classroom. I want to let you know that I challenged the school board, all of them, to participate at 100%, and they have beat you. They are all in at 100%. So I am here tonight to challenge the 6 of you as well to commit to sponsor a teacher with a $100 gift card. Those will be given out in August for the community members that are here or maybe listening online. We would love to have your participation as well. And thank you again for supporting our schools and our teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Next speaker, Sarah Freeman. Please come forward and state your name and address and zip code for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Sarah Wilkerson Freeman, 7684 Appahon Lane. For one, it was a pleasure to hear something uttered when I came in about the sanctity of the veracity of the agenda, that what is actually announced on the agenda looking something like what is actually going to be discussed. Because as we all know, what happened in 2016 with 2 ordinances, 2016-10 and the ill-fated 2016-11, it was a debacle, quite frankly, and I think we all agree on that. And most especially because the public was not aware of what was going on because it was repeatedly advertised as having to do with, quote, beer ordinances, when, in point of fact, major changes were made regarding alcohol. Beer is Article 3 of our alcohol ordinances. Alcohol is Article 4. So what was going on in Article 4 was not adequately disclosed to the public at all. So the Germantown City Administrator and City Attorney, though, also continued to claim that what changes were being made were because of the new state law, and that is simply not true. Most especially a change that was made that was very dramatic was to place on T4, where liquor selling establishments are prohibited, not even by warrant can you have it. A way was tried to be made through the debacle of these ordinances to make it legal. However, within the Tennessee state law, there is a section that in no way, there's no way to construe that the lawmakers meant to take every dry county and make it wet, or to take every dry zoned district and make it wet. So for those of you taking notes, Section 57-3-806B, this requires a certificate to be somehow obtained, and it's not clear because we did not change our ordinance to recognize this. Anybody who wants to apply to have a grocery store that sells alcohol, wine, must first get a certificate that says that they are in compliance, that location works for alcohol, that it's legal. That it's legal. So in other words, there's nothing in the law that requires us, or it moves us a bit, to change the prohibitions of alcohol that exist.
30 seconds.
That is simply not the case. So I am going to go to the body that Mr. Palazzolo mentioned that cares about the sanctity of how government is done and have them review what actually did go on with what was said was happening with those ordinances and what in fact is required by the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Our next speaker is Pauline Latham. Please come forward, state your name and address with zip code for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Pauline Latham, 6958 Country Road, 38138. Same subject as Ms. Freeman. I'm here to discuss the enactment of those ordinances. Is the past November 28th, 2016-10. It was affected in a misleading and non-transparent manner. I say this for 3 reasons. First, the publicly noticed agenda items were misleading. Second, the explanations made during the BMA meetings omitted material details. Finally, we had no access to these changes on the city website. Although it is true we could have seen the changes that were made from reading to reading had we specifically requested them from the city. We had no reason to do so because we were misled about the content. This saga began on October 4th when the Planning Commission approved several general changes that were incorporated into the first reading on October 24th. The city said the lighting and retail changes were needed to clarify the zoning code. These changes were accurately described in the BMA meeting agenda item as General Amendment to Zoning Code, first reading. I'm not sure why the Planning Commission was ever involved. Everything the Planning Commission approved on October 4th was thrown out after the BMA's first reading. The Planning Commission never considered the subsequent changes to 2016-10. The agenda item at the second reading on November 14th read Amendment to Beer Ordinance, second reading and public hearing. Beer has a completely different set of ordinances from alcoholic beverages. The only mention of alcohol during the second reading was that the alcohol changes were needed to bring the alcohol ordinance into compliance with state law. The import was that no significant changes were being made with regard to alcohol, and that was simply untrue. There was no explanation that T4 had been added to the list of zoned areas where alcohol could be served. The T4 change had nothing to do with amendments to beer ordinances. While relatively unimportant changes, such as those pertaining to breweries and growlers, were discussed on November 14th, nothing was said about T4. For the third reading, November 28th, although the title of 2016-10 was Amend Charter 3 Alcohol Ordinances, the publicly noticed agenda item again referred simply to the beer ordinance. Again, there was no reference to T4, but a new change was made between the second and third readings, a change which removed protections for distances between residences and liquor selling establishments. Not only that, this new change was not even redlined for the aldermen, and like the T4 change, no reference to this was made during the meeting. As I stated at the beginning, the enactment...
That's 3 minutes. Please conclude your remarks.
I ask that this be repealed and that you begin the process anew. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Stephanie Brockway. If you could come forth and come to one of the podiums and state your name and address with zip code for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Stephanie Brockway, 8981 Dogwood Road, 38139. I'm just here to thank all of our city employees, our city staff, our aldermen, our mayor for an incredible event yesterday. I wanted to thank our many citizens that are in the audience right now that volunteered. This was strictly volunteer. We had over 5,000 people come. It was an incredible day for our schools, an incredible day for our community. And I just wanted to thank police and fire. My goodness, your presence there was amazing. And it's just a gush party right now. I just wanted to tell you that. But thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. We appreciate the partnerships with our community, the partnerships with our businesses, our sponsors, and we appreciate our city staff and our incredible citizens. And this could not have been done without you. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brockway. That concludes citizens to be heard for this meeting. Brings us to item number 9 on the agenda, donations, Germantown Community Library and Germantown Regional History and Genealogy Center. Our librarian, Daniel Page. Mr. Page.
Good evening, Mayor and Aldermen. I'd like to ask the representatives from the Tennessee Genealogical Society and the Friends of the Germantown Community Library to come forward tonight for special recognition. That way you don't have to just look at me. The last person who did that is no longer with us. In compliance with key performance area, city services and finance, Objective 5, the city will provide community services that are responsive to customer needs. You have the agenda before you tonight, which is to recognize and accept donations made to the Germantown Community Library in the amount of $3,879 and to the Germantown Regional History and Genealogy Center in the amount of $297 and to approve budget adjustment number 17-65. The library works in partnership with many local organizations to provide top quality services to its patrons. We have two of those organizations represented tonight. The first is the Tennessee Genealogical Society. They do a tremendous amount of work that benefits the community, and for our purposes tonight, the primary thing that they do for us is they help us to secure records, both print and digital, that have to do with preserving a record of Germantown's history so that all of the wonderful things that take place in our community are documented for the history of our community and our citizens. And what they have given us tonight is $297 to purchase a resource, a book, for our collection. I'd like to also mention, though it's not on your document before you tonight, is that what is sometimes not seen is the many thousands of hours that they volunteer to staff the Genealogy Center. It's worth a lot of money, and it's just a wonderful resource that they provide to our community. So I'd like to take a minute and just recognize these wonderful people. Also with us tonight is Allison Bodkin. She represents the Friends of the Germantown Community Library. Just a wonderful person. I thoroughly enjoy getting to know her. And tonight you have before you $3,879 from that group, which means that throughout their history they've donated about $200,000 to the library. And that's just tremendous. I'd like to thank them. So before you tonight is $500 to support the Battle of the Books, and then $3,379 is a donation to be used to enhance library programs and events, which is a beautiful sentence. But I'd like to tell you what those programs and events are. One, they're giving $579 for a little library at Germantown Middle School. And the little libraries are wonderful. I won't take up your time, but it's wonderful. They're going to put one at the school. It's great. They're giving us $1,500 for an amazingly fantastic 3D printer. So we're going to do some just wonderful partnerships with local students using this 3D printer that we don't know how to use yet, but if you approve it, we're going to purchase it and learn how to use it. We're going to support all the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and the arts. It's going to be great and fantastic. Then they've given us $1,300 for more events with the schools. And so I would just like to state again publicly how wonderful these groups are and how so very thankful we are.
Good. You guys stay up here for a second, please. Tony Fisher, if you were a photographer earlier, can you take a picture of this group, please? And then while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and read the motion. Is there a motion to accept donations of $3,879 to the Germantown Community Library and a donation of $297 to the Germantown Regional History and Genealogy Center, and to approve budget adjustment number 17-65?
Move to approve.
There's a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey? Alderman Owens?
Thank you to both groups, and Daniel for your enthusiasm, too. Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
You've had to wait through a lot. If you'd like to leave, you can do so graciously. I know Charlie wants to stay to the very end, but if you'd like to go home and catch some dinner, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you to the Friends, and thank you to Jen and Daniel. We very much appreciate it. Brings us to item number 10 on the agenda, project development contract number 1195, Harvest Church. Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Mr. Page and the Friends' success at the library is always a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. In front of you tonight is project development contract number 1195 for Harvest Church. This is to approve the construction of an expansion of their existing buildings for 10,350 square feet, and then the addition of another 51,243 square foot classroom building. This property was originally annexed into the city of Germantown in July of 2000, but this property was originally the site of the Forest Hill Baptist Church that was built in 1998. We have had a couple of use on appeals to the BZA for the expansion of this use as a church for both their parking lot expansion as they've continued to grow, they being Harvest Church, and then for the expansion that's in front of you tonight that had to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals before moving on to Planning Commission for its approval. This is a standard development agreement, and it does cover the entirety of the 14.37 acres, but the specific construction project is the 10,000 square foot expansion and then the 50,000 square foot classroom addition. We are available for any questions. The church pastor as well as members of the congregation are in the audience, and this does meet the Forward 2030 strategic objective of making sure that we grow commercial as well as other uses within our key areas of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Questions for staff on this agenda item? Is there a motion to approve project development contract 1195 for Harvest Church expansion and classroom addition?
Move to approve.
It's a motion.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
You have your development contract. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Spence. I'll tell you, you guys can go too if you like. Takes us to item number 11 on the agenda, second reading and public hearing of ordinance 2017-6, amending Chapter 3, Article 4, manufacture, sale, storage, transportation, and distribution of alcoholic beverages of Germantown Code of Ordinances. Attorney Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. What you have before you tonight is on second reading and public hearing, the amendments to Section 3-114 of our alcoholic beverage and beer ordinance, as well as amendments to Section 3-116. A little bit of background. There were amendments that were made to the alcoholic beverage and beer ordinance in the fall of 2016, and thereafter, it really goes back to before then. There were, as far back as I believe 2015, there was a consideration given as arising out of a retreat, as I understand it, to the establishment of a beer board. That went before the BMA and, on one reading and did not go any further. Thereafter, there were changes that were proposed with regard to growlers, tastings, much later in the process with regard to on-premise and off-premises and combination of on-premise and off-premise beer sales that might accommodate, for example, a brewery. Those processes were moving forward, and in the summer of 2016, the law went into effect that allowed the sale of wine in grocery stores. As this went forward, there was let me back up for a little bit of history for those that haven't heard this before. The entire collection of alcoholic beverage and beer ordinances goes back to the 1960s. Over the course of the years, changes were made, not always in complete accordance with other provisions. And as our lawyers were looking at all that, they began to make changes in order to make them consistent. As I said, in the last segment of this, there were this change with regard to sale of wine in grocery stores. So what happened in the end was the ordinance was passed on 3 readings, and thereafter questions were raised about its effect on the location of liquor stores. That was brought to my attention that someone had raised that concern. I then looked at the ordinance and determined what had happened. The provision with regard to the sale of alcoholic beverage for off-premises consumption was amended with regard to the location of establishments. There, we were attempting to put in place the locations where you could have liquor stores and grocery stores. The defined term for that for a liquor store is a retailer. For a retail food store for a grocery store is a retail food store. We lumped those together. They should have been made separate. And once there was a question about whether or not there had ever been any intent to change location or provisions with regard to liquor stores, I went in there, I looked at it, I observed it, I reported it to the administration, and then at our retreat, I reported it to you. And at our retreat, I informed you that we would be bringing forward to the BMA corrective amendments to that section of the ordinance, which is 3-116. With regard to 3-114, in the course of the readings of the ordinance, I pointed out to the BMA, those that were members then, that there was an inconsistency with regard to restaurants concerning what's in the beer ordinance portion and what's in the alcoholic beverage portion. They were different. And we talked through what has really been the wisdom of the city to not set very precise measurement restrictions with regard to restaurants. And the decision was made to make those provisions consistent. There was no 200-foot restriction for beer sales for restaurants in the beer section. This 200-foot restriction was over here for alcoholic beverages in the alcoholic beverage section. And so the decision was made to make that amendment. No one ever intended to have that amendment apply to liquor stores. When I reviewed it, which was sometime in the winter, that too was brought to the attention of the administration and to the BMA at our retreat. So what we have brought forward are two amendments to make those changes. If you'll look at the changes with me, I'd like for you to look at the red line version that you have from first from the bottom. Let's start with the order I just followed, which is 3-116, which is entitled Location of Establishments. What we have now done is do what we should have done the first time. We have separated the retailers from the retail food stores. We have listed those locations where you can have a retailer, meaning a liquor store, in Germantown. And those are C2, SC1, T5 with the approval of a warrant, and T6 with the approval of a warrant. Those are the only sections in which we should have any retailers located. It's important to go forward with this amendment to put that in place. We separated, as I said earlier, the retail food stores, and we identified there those zoning districts where you could possibly have a retail food store. And so now they are separated. That's the difference between the previous 3116 and the current 3116. It is important to put these restrictions in place. Now, while I'm at it, I'd like to comment on comments that were made at our the first reading. There were suggestions made that we use the capitalized term retailers, and there was a suggestion that was made to delete wholesale because wholesale really is inapplicable in Germantown. So the changes that you see that are designated in yellow on your on this version reflect that, and I believe make it very clear where retailers can go and where retail food stores can go. That's the first change in 3-116. Secondly, back up in 3-114, we have added back in the provision that restricts retailers, subject to the discretion of the BMA, within 20 feet of any residentially zoned property.
200 feet?
200, thank you. 200 feet of, thanks for listening, of that long, within 200 feet of any residentially zoned property. So these are the changes that you're being asked to approve by me, by the administration, in order to bring this in line.
Let's, in keeping with our tradition, we have a public hearing, so if you could make note of your questions of staff, then it can be incorporated with whatever comes forth from the public would be very helpful.
Would it be appropriate to make my amendment on them?
Why don't we get all the feedback first? Okay. It might make you augment it differently, so that'd be great. Right now, I'll declare a public hearing open, and anyone who would like to come forward, first, if anyone would like to come forward and speak in favor of this particular agenda item. Anyone want to come forward and speak in favor of it? Again, anyone in favor, come forward, please. If anyone would like to come forward and speak against this, please do so at this time. You have 3 minutes. I'm not going to read citizens to be heard guidelines, but they are applicable.
I understand them.
State your name and address for the record, please.
Sarah Wilkerson Freeman, 7684 Appahan Lane. There's a reason why nobody is coming forward to support these. As you saw in the letter that I sent to all of you, and I hope you did get a chance to read it, I'm sorry for its breadth, but because the debacle was such a tangled web, it took a lot to really go through. Quite frankly, 217-6 is fruit of the poison tree. I know, and I have in writing, that 2 of the 5 aldermen who are then sitting aldermen were not aware that with this ordinance that they were putting alcohol on T4. So I have that in writing. So clearly not only was the public fooled by what was going on with that early ordinance, the aldermen themselves were as well, and this is unfortunate. As to 217-6, these changes do not rectify the problem. What would be best, fairest, most honest, is if quite simply, again, 2016-10 be repealed, or at the very least, since the beer ordinance, which was Article 3, was disclosed, but Article 4 was not adequately disclosed, at least repeal the changes to Article 4. Then go forward. There was supposed to be an alcohol task force. I put in requests for records. Hardly any records apparently were ever generated regarding these discussions of alcohol because I was given hardly anything. And so for one, on the properties that are T4, there are residences directly across the street. Cordova Road is right across the street from a T4 property. What you do not see is in Section 116, do you see any kind of residential distance required whatsoever from a grocery store, which also then presumes from a restaurant? So those little girls living on Cordova Road could be waving at whoever is drinking their cocktail on a patio directly across the street. I attended the BMA retreat. It seemed to be everyone's understanding here that there was a discussion about what you wanted to do in terms of the proximity of residences to restaurants. And now instead we're hearing a presumption that somehow alcohol was all along allowed, which indeed, in smart code, if it means anything, liquor selling establishments are prohibited. Liquor selling is a land use. It doesn't say liquor selling establishment means liquor store, so it's not about liquor stores. There are all kinds of establishments that sell liquor. So there's some fancy footwork going on in terms of language. It is not appreciated. And the people who live, especially by the Cordova Road Triangle, have understood all along from the beginning that liquor selling establishments meant restaurants, meant certainly liquor stores, and now, of course, would mean grocery stores. And again, the state law does not in any way require putting alcohol on a zone where it is prohibited. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Freeman. Anyone else like to come forward and speak to this? Please come forward and state your name, address with zip code. You have 3 minutes to speak to the board during this public hearing.
My name is Jim Brazil, and I live at 1863 Cordova Road, zip code 38138. And I would like to just read into the record the letter that I sent to all of you. I don't know if you all got it back on January 9 when this came up, but this Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. In 2006, I participated in charrettes, leading up to the 2007 adoption of a well-designed Germantown Smart Growth Plan, of which I'm a strong proponent. I think it's been good for our city. A charrette is defined as a meeting in which all stakeholders in a project attempt to resolve conflicts and map resolutions. Regarding the 2 Owens tracts of land north of the Civic Center, the section of the plan on page 47 is headed, quote, retain landscape and tree mass as entry features to town center and states a tree buffer should be maintained as opposed to the standard solution of clear cutting and stripping out the property, which would be in flagrant contradiction to the placemaking goals of the 2020 Vision Plan, end quote. As of today, I see only one solitary oak on the tract that was once heavily wooded. That same section goes on to say, where both properties abut existing residential development, new proposals should include single-family lots to act as a transition. At that time, those of us living on Cordova Road were assured that the commercial and high-density residential uses of the South Owens tract would be restricted to the Germantown Road side and that single-family lots would face Cordova Road. Under the zoning amendment being proposed, I could be faced with a liquor store or a restaurant literally 50 feet directly across the street from my house, and I do understand that has changed according to the change that's been presented tonight. Although my property does not abut this tract, those of us across Cordova Road are entitled to the same transition setback that is offered to commercial uses that applies to abutting residences. I further suggest that curbside parking, and I think this is important, along Cordova Road be allowed only in front of single-family lots. So to the extent that it is developed with other commercial type uses, we aren't faced with that parking situation
30 seconds.
On Cordova. Okay. I earlier read the definition of charrette. Let me cite another definition. An absurd pretense intended to create a pleasant or respectful appearance. This is a definition of charade. I believe that to revise the smart growth plan through amendments or warrants in a way that undermine the stated intent of the ordinance makes a charade out of the charrettes. And I'd like to avoid that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to step forward and speak to the board? Please come forward and state your name, address, and zip code for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Jim Jacobs. I live at 7684 Apple Valley Road, 38138. And I spoke at Citizens to be Heard a couple weeks ago about this issue indirectly, and Mr. Brazil has done a much more eloquent job of stating the same point that I was attempting to make at that time. During the smart growth development, we were assured that T4 would be a transition from residential to commercial, and it would be primarily residential on the side that abutted the residential areas on Cordova Road and Neshoba Road. This amendment that you're considering tonight, I find to be incredibly confusing, and I encourage you not to approve it until it can be written in a manner that is much better understood. Okay, there is no reason to put alcohol selling operations in T4 zoned areas. It is not necessary. It's not warranted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Anyone else like to come forward? Anybody else like to come forward and speak to the board? Just come forward and state your name, address with zip code for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Don Lossing. I live at 1475 Cordova Road, 38138. I'm a neighbor in the adjoining area to the Owens tract, which comes under the discussion tonight by virtue of it is T4. I'm also president of the neighborhood association there, and I also attend church that is right there in that neighborhood. And speaking for myself, but basically my perception is that liquor would be unwelcome in that area for a variety of reasons. One thing that I would like to bring up is that we have a school that is rapidly in the process of being expanded right down the street from this tract. And if I understand correctly, liquor can be sold during day or night. People get drunk when they leave their liquor establishments. And I can imagine someone going down the Shover Road westward in a manner that might put a lot of kids in jeopardy down through there. There's already a lot of congestion down in that area when people are dropping off kids. A lot of them come to work on their school on their bikes, unattended, and it's a dangerous situation already. And liquor in that area is not going to help anything. And I ask that you folks seriously consider the situation that you have before you, the proposal that you have before you, and maybe reconsider what might have been your vote otherwise. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Would anyone else like to come forward and speak to this item? Anyone else like to come forward and speak to this item? Yes, please state your name, address, and zip code.
Pauline Latham, 6958 Country Road, 38138. This city has always bragged about being transparent. I mean, I think I hear that from every one of you, and I think a lot of times that's true. In this particular case, I think Sarah stated it best. You were completely transparent about the beer changes, but completely non-transparent that you actually passed having restaurants in T4 that could serve alcohol. That is not one of the items that's being changed back to where it was, so I would just ask that you, again, turn this amendment down and start anew on the alcohol changes. Because as late as this week, we weren't even sure what had been passed because it was so confusing. And I just don't think that's the way to run the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to step forward? Anyone else like to speak to the board on this matter? See no one come forward, that concludes the public hearing for this agenda item, and we return to the board with any questions of staff. Alderman Yonda.
Yes, good. I turn this on again. I want some clarity. I thought T4, we could always have restaurants in T4. If we could have Mr. Ross come forward and talk about Cordova Road, and in reality, the only thing we're talking about is restaurants. We can't have liquor stores there. I think everybody's pretty aware that most restaurants in our community have tons of kids in it, along with a bar. But I would like to know some clarity on how the width of the road has to be. There won't be anything on Cordova Road, I hope. And this is good. I mean, I realize that Mr. Harris is a lawyer, and it is confusing to a certain extent, but the basic thing is we're trying to correct a 200-foot residential zone to rezone liquor stores specifically. And then we're trying to make sure that retail food stores that are permitted to sell wine in the city at retail locations are included in all these different zones, including the T4, which is what they're concerned about. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Mr. Ross.
To the Alderman, with regard to the permitted uses within the T4 district, 23-763, the permitted use table, is what I just passed out to each of you. And 23-763A4 addresses retail uses, of which a retail building is included, as well as a restaurant, and then a retail liquor selling establishment. If you turn the page to C, and you look at the column titled T4, and then consider 4, the row 4, and retail. Limited retail is discussed as it applies in T4. Limited retail limits the building area for retail use to the first story of buildings at corner locations with at least one major street as defined in 1756C. 1756C defines a major street as 80 to 160 feet wide. These streets are used primarily for fast or heavy traffic. It goes further to say that not more than 5,000 square feet per block along the major street. A block is defined in 1757 blocks as a length of not more than 1,500 feet. Those blocks along the major street where storefront, shop fronts are recommended or required on the regulating plan. And then B, within limited retail, is that the specific use shall further be limited to neighborhood stores or restaurants seating no more than 100. So if you consider those guidelines of streets and blocks in a major street, Cordova Road and the location of any retail establishment, be it a retail liquor selling establishment, a restaurant, or a retail food store, and think about it in the terms of a major street, Germantown Road is the only location in which a shop front would be indicated as an allowed use by the T4 zoning district limited retail use regulations.
But previous to this, T4 still allowed restaurants. Is that correct?
I am reading to you the language as it exists today, as it's existed since this was adopted, as it's existed since it was amended in 2015.
Are you answering his question?
Yes.
Can you answer with a yes or no?
Hold on one moment, Alderman Massey. Alderman Yonda, you have the floor. Is that satisfy your?
That takes care of it. Thank you.
Thank you. You yield the floor, Alderman Massey.
So I understood that you read back the language, but I think Alderman Yonda's question, Clerk, would you repeat the question exactly as he read it? Do you have the ability to do that? Alderman Yonda, do you remember your question exactly as you said it?
What we're doing right now doesn't affect what T4 was all along, correct? So what it's basically doing is making a correction with our 200-foot rule. But it wouldn't affect what we've had in T4 all these years. Well, 3 years, 2 years, whatever it's been.
To the aldermans, both aldermen, at this point, a restaurant is allowed by right. A retail building, which could include a retail food store, is allowed by right. A liquor selling establishment functioning in its retail capacity is not allowed in T4 and is only allowed by warrant in T5 and T6.
Okay, thank you.
Have liquor selling establishments, or including restaurants, always been allowed in T4?
The drafters of the code specifically parsed out restaurants as a separate use from a retail liquor selling establishment. So by virtue of what was drafted in the original code, one can assume that restaurants are judged on their own merits separate from a retail liquor selling establishment. And further, as indicated by 116 and 114, it's at the board's discretion on the location of any operation of an alcoholic beverage or beer selling establishment, of which restaurants are included.
Alderman Owens.
Yeah, I do.
So, okay, I'm trying to, and we've been through this a lot, and I think I've got a handle on it, but, and then sometimes the corner, so where in effect could a restaurant be located within the T4 zone, and specifically in regards to the Cordova Triangle that has been discussed here this evening? As I understand it, or let me just further pontificate, only along Germantown Road, and is it only at the corner of Germantown Road and Exeter, or could it be further up to the south, I guess, along Germantown Road?
As the limited retail regulations state, building area available for retail use is limited to the first story of buildings at corner locations with at least one major street.
Yeah.
So, yes, corner locations.
All right. And
no more than 5,000 square feet per block along that 1,500 linear feet of block.
Okay. So 5,000 square feet per block, no more than 100 seats, and only at the corners. And this body, the Board of Aldermen, has the authority to approve or not approve any type of beer license, liquor license?
Alcoholic beverages or beer sales.
I have one more question. I'm sorry, and this is...
Continue.
Did you have some further clarification?
Correct, in accordance with your provisions that allow for the Beer Board in its case and the BMA in its case to consider whether such activity would cause congestion of traffic, interference with schools, churches, or other places of public gathering, or interfere with public health and safety. That's the criteria if a restaurant was to come forward either under beer or under alcoholic beverages in T4. That's what your ordinance says.
Okay. And just a little bit further clarification, not necessarily related to this, but what we're looking at tonight, but there was some discussion from our residents that that there would be, they were told or that it was implied to them that we would have single-family residential adjacent to Cordova and Neshoba. Can you talk a little bit about what is allowed on those streets? What uses?
The uses that are on the 23763 use chart as it relates to T4, those are all allowed within T4 and could potentially be applied along Cordova Road.
And can you talk
However,
about... Okay, sorry, my bad, go ahead.
The Central Business District Smart Code Plan and the charrette that was referenced by the resident is also a tool that's used since the Smart Code was and Smart Growth small area plans were always citizen-driven tools. Those are also resources that we go to determine the appropriate uses. T4 is clearly a use that, clearly a district that helps to make that transition between commercial areas and denser areas and existing residential areas. So those considerations that were brought forward as part of the Smart Growth Plan would be considered on any specific development. So while not having specific developments on the Cordova Triangle to consider, what we can point to on uses that are allowed within T4 are laid out clearly in 23763.
I'm sorry, I know that was the last question, but what are the buffers that are required on the borders of T4 as they are adjacent to single-family residential? Sorry, I should have asked you this question earlier.
While it's a critical question, the buffer that's required is one that is not on the regulating plan currently as it relates to T4. It is on the regulating plan for the Central Business District as it relates to T5. There is a map element called a landscape preservation area that directly abuts the areas around the Cordova Triangle. It specifically applies to those areas. However, within the Smart Code, it's still not, it does not have a legal meets and bounds application to it. So it's a complicated answer,
Understood.
Alderman Owens.
Here's what I would say. I believe that based on what you're telling us here today, and what I've heard from Attorney Harris, there are protections in place for the residents adjacent to T4 when it comes to the liquor both at restaurants and in grocery stores. Obviously, they're not allowed, period, as a liquor retailer. What I would like to see us work on going forward is tightening up the ordinance with regards to buffers and what is permitted in the size and scope of the buffer that would be on a T4 adjacent to single-family residential.
In a practical sense, we will consider that.
Thank you.
Alderman Barzizza.
Thank you, Mayor. Who would have thought 4 years ago that we would have wine in the supermarkets predicated on the law the way it was written, or the bill as it was written at that point in time? And not long after that, probably about 3 years ago, the Wholesale Grocers Association got real smart, and they decided to make a local option.
and giving the right to the voters to whether they could have wine in the supermarkets or not. That's fine. Everybody's is fine with that. I don't have a problem with it. But the matter is that, as I stated in executive session, that there in Colorado is an example where the supermarkets, say Safeway is an example, happens to be next door to Argonaut, which is a huge liquor store. And so what happened out there, they were selling 3-2 beer in Safeway, and there was a law passed in Colorado where the grocers got liquor, wine, and beer all at once. Now there's a movement afoot through DISCUS, the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, to equalize rights to location of the points of sale. So they want to be able to sell alcoholic beverages, whether it's bourbon or whatever it may be, spirits-wise. They want to have the same right to sell it the same place that beer is being sold and that wine is being sold. So what's to stop in the future DISCUS succeeding, number one, in that endeavor? So we have groceries on a T4 property that are selling wine that suddenly by federal law will be allowed to sell distilled spirits. We already have 6 liquor stores in town with the addition of Vom Voss opening up this week. And then with the grocers that we have now selling wine, that's another 4, I think, maybe 5 in our area. And potentially we have in front of us something that we will not be able to handle unless we start handling it now and trying to prepare against what could be inevitable. There is in Washington, with the Republican Congress, and having been on the Hill many times in Washington, they are all about free trade with as far as business is concerned. They don't want to see restrictions. So what we need to do here, as I stated at the business session or executive session, is that we need to maybe drop back and punt and study what we've got all together, just everything that we've got, and prepare ourselves, the city, against what the public doesn't want, and that is liquor sales in a T4 area on the package level and the supermarket. So by restricting the grocers in T4, that could help, but Mr. Harris and I are going to get together and discuss this further. But I'm having been in the industry 43 years in distilled spirits and wine industry and 20 years in the beer industry. I do know a little something about what can happen, and I know a lot about what has happened. And we were the first state since 1988 to get wine in the supermarkets. That's how controlled it was. And then all of a sudden it just blew apart. Now Arkansas is voting, and many, many other states. Anyway, I can go through the litany of them, but it doesn't matter. And I think these two sections, Section 3-114 and Section 3-116, though they're both related to location, they are different in scope. And looking at 314, I'm proposing a motion to add to 3-114C a motion to add within 200 feet of any other retailer. Now, that's one vote. Now, in regards to the two together, I really and truly think that these two need to be separated
I think 314 can be voted on this evening. 3-114, excuse me, can be voted on this evening, but I think Section 3-116 needs to be studied a whole lot more, evaluated, in lieu of the fact that we just never know what's going to happen. And we sit up here, we've got our police force that protects us on a day-to-day basis, but we, as aldermen and the mayor and Mr. Lawton, we're here to protect the citizens too, and at this level. So what I'm saying is that I make another motion to hold 316 and have a study of 3-116 and give Mr. Harris and I and whoever else wants to participate an opportunity to really discuss this out of the business session, because in half an hour with the 20 minutes we spend on it, it's nothing. But there is a tremendous amount of stuff to be considered and discovered through conversation with people outside of our area, people who are in the wholesale business in other states, people who are with the Tennessee Alcoholic Beverage Commission, people who are with other agencies across the country. So I'd say that, and with being very humble about this, this is something that we don't want to make a mistake now that we can't correct later on. We could have right in Jim's, Brazil's yard, that grocery that's there, whatever grocery that will be there at some point in time, they could be selling distilled spirits. And I don't think Brazil or any of the people in the entire neighborhood want to see a liquor store, even though it's fronted. It would be a liquor store, no matter. You can call it a grocery, but it would be a retail grocery liquor store. And even though it's fronting Germantown Parkway, it's still that close to their neighborhood. So,
Alderman Barzizza, could I make a comment and suggestion? First of all, I personally enjoy hearing your the history because of your knowledge, and I'm happy for the opportunity to share with you this week or as soon as we can, and also share with you what I know about the history of our ordinance, or what I've learned about it, I'll say. But here's what I think about your last comment. It's really important to pass 3-116 and separate liquor stores from grocery stores. That's really important to get corrected now, so that you don't have a situation where a liquor store shows up in a zoning district where no one ever intended for them to be. That's the most important thing we're doing tonight. And I agree with your concerns about the future, but for the moment, I'm more concerned about now. Now, one more thing to also that I think addresses your concern for the future. In Section B, which talks about what a retail food store may do, this only allows them to sell wine. It is wine specific. So if, for example, liquor comes along, hopefully whoever attempts to impose that upon a community would also allow for a referendum to have a choice. But even if they didn't, our restriction is limited to wine. And I think that addresses the most immediate problem so that people aren't concerned that liquor stores, few as there are, might turn up in a place that no one ever intended them to be located.
Then I make a motion then that we add to 3-116B a restriction on the distance as well, to some degree, more than 50 feet, because it's 50 feet currently, correct?
Well, again, if you allow me to make a suggestion about that motion, I think the place to do that would be back in 3-114, because we could easily add a D. You see, we have a C that has a 200-foot restriction with regard to retailers. We could easily add a D and select a distance for retail food stores. so that they would be a distance from residentially zoned neighborhood. Do you see how that would work consistently?
I understand, but I'm wondering if the public would really understand.
Well, someone at the last meeting said they were confused. This is confusing to sort through the various buckets that are in your alcohol, beverage, and beer ordinance. Compare that to state law and state regulation, especially the way it has been amended over time. But what we have is what we have, and we really need to make this change. We can continue to work on it in any way you wish. It's an important issue for the community. But right now, as I understand it, we have 5 liquor stores.
6.
Is it now 6? Okay. It's limited, so many per, one per 4,000 people, whatever it is. But it's really important to get this corrected. And there's some there's some saying about we can continue to work on perfection, but right now we need to work on correction.
Alderman Gibson is the only person who's not weighed in yet, so I'd like to give her an opportunity too before we go on seconds, so to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I did also appreciate this dialogue. That's very helpful. Mr. Ross and I have met several times to the point where we even got some visual aids. This is, whether it was a beer stein, this is a retailer, this is a retail food establishment. It's very important that we get this right. I want to say that to you and to you as well. It's important, to Alderman Barziza's point, as far as moving forward with some discussion, whether it's in a work session. For this, as complicated as it is, with, I believe, a lot of smart people that are at the helm of it, that I trust. We're here. That if we could take that time before the third reading, that would be something that I would like to see. Again, not to open it up to a conversation about what may be coming down the pike, but to be very specific that we, on third reading, when this comes before us, that we know exactly, that our citizens know exactly what we're passing.
Thank you. Alderman Massey?
Did these changes have to go through the Planning Commission? I know in 2013, the 2013-15 amendment to Section 3-116, it looks like that amendment went through the Planning Commission. I was just wondering if we followed that process here, and if we didn't, why not?
The zoning ordinance requires any changes to it to first be approved by the Planning Commission, but that's not the case with regard to alcoholic beverage ordinance.
This was an alcoholic beverage ordinance.
Correct. This is beer and alcoholic beverage, and it's not required to go to the Planning Commission first. Now, let me say this. It is also very important that the provisions mirror one another. That needs to happen. But for the moment, again, to put the grocery stores where they belong and put the liquor stores where they belong, I urge you to go forward with these changes. And again, if you want to make suggestions such as Alderman Barziza about a distance requirement with regard to the grocery store portion, I think you can make that amendment. That's consistent with what we are all considering, which is a change to the alcoholic beverage provision.
Well, I'm looking at the minutes from November 25th, 2013, and it was the amendment to Section 3-116, the alcoholic beverage location of establishments regarding zoning districts. It was the first reading. And I guess what I'm saying is it looks like this went through the Planning Commission. So if we're going to be consistent, my question is, why aren't we still following that process where we go through the Planning Commission? Because what I'm getting around to is some of this might have been clarified had it gone through the Planning Commission first and then brought to us more cleanly, and we wouldn't have to be having these conversations as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. They seem to understand the zoning maybe a little bit better. I mean, they're plugged in, and so if it was done in 2013, why have we changed our process?
Well, again, there's no requirement that take place. And also, keep in mind, these changes here are there really is no zoning change taking place if you adopt this amendment. You're putting the retailers where they are allowed. They're only allowed in 4 zoning districts under the zoning code: C2, SC1, T5 with a warrant, T6 with a warrant. The rest of the changes here are identifying the zoning districts where you can have a grocery store. We're not changing where you can have a grocery store. We're just putting them in there so that no one can get confused. This is where liquor stores are allowed. This is where grocery stores are allowed. And I just think the best thing we can do is go forward with that, and that is no change. That is putting everything right where it belongs.
I think we're changing the use, and I think it's important for us to go back to really what I feel like is important to our citizens, and it's that we maintain this buffer between our residential neighborhoods. And regardless of whether it's a liquor store or a restaurant, I don't think our residents want anyone selling liquor within close proximity to their homes and to their churches. When this particular amendment was passed in 2013, one of the comments that Alderman Owens made was that typically shopping centers are located further away from a school, religious institution, and residence. I think that's what Germantown wants. And so if I were going to make a motion tonight, I would actually make the motion to move T4 entirely from this amendment. And so I think that's what I would recommend. If in fact there are 2 aldermen on this board that didn't realize that T4 was part of the original amendment in the first place, well, that's a problem, and that's a question I have for you and Mr. Ross. Did any of the aldermen come to you and say, we weren't aware that liquor, alcohol, beer was going to be sold in T4, any of those? So did any of the aldermen come to you and say that?
That was. Let me help you by following what's in the ordinance. What is?
Mr. Harris, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'll lose my train of thought in my question. So if you could just answer yes or no to that, I would appreciate it. Did any of the aldermen come to you? And I can ask it separately. I can ask it for alcohol. I can ask it for liquor. I can ask it for beer if that makes it easier, because I did run those together. So let me do that. Did any of the aldermen come to you and say that they didn't realize that liquor was going to be sold in T4?
I don't recall that, but let's be clear about what it says. The only thing that's being permitted in T4 is a retail food store. That's what 3-116B says.
If I can also clarify.
Not liquor stores, not retailers. So the point of that is neither under the zoning code nor under this alcohol and beverage code, if you'll go ahead and amend it, in neither place will you have the possibility of a liquor store, a retailer in T4. That's what's so important.
Well, we changed that. I think you amended it after the first reading, didn't you?
Not that part.
That's what they approved the first time. That's where the possibility was that maybe the alderman didn't realize that T4 was in the original amendment, I guess.
Alderman Owens.
Yes. I'm not done.
Okay. Well, you had a pause there. Go ahead.
Well, I was waiting for him to answer my question.
I'm sorry. I couldn't follow that one. Sorry.
Well, the change originally, this amendment that we're amending, added in T4 as a permitted use, or liquor as a permitted use on T4. And what we're saying now is that some of these aldermen, or at least 2 of these aldermen, didn't realize that someone put T4 into that amendment. And I guess let's if that's true, there really should be an investigation into what occurred that allowed that not to be disclosed. Now, if that's not true, if the aldermen were aware of this and misled Ms. Freeman, then that's a totally different issue. But we have to get to the bottom of why this occurred and why there seems to be uncertainty about T4 being allowed to sell alcohol, liquor, and nobody seems to be able to answer that. I mean, I think it should be. I don't think any alcohol should be allowed on T4. It should be a buffer zone. Let's just make it simple and remove it from T4 altogether.
Alderman Owens.
Could we call the question, please? And if I'd like to make a motion.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mary Ann, you had something else
Sure.
to say. Go ahead.
Just a simple question. We spoke about it during our retreat. And Mr. Ross, not to revisit what we have already spoken about on multiple occasions, there were unintended consequences with the verbiage in the previous ordinance, correct?
Correct.
Would you please, for the entire board's clarification of how that happened, how this is being remedied now?
At this point, the regulations are unchanged, and staff is now modifying internally based on a directive from administration and the mayor to make sure that we move forward with correcting any changes as it relates to the modifications and zoning code changes that we made before we bring those back. We were directed to take those to Planning Commission so that we follow a full, clear, and transparent path.
So, point of clarification,
sure,
Mayor. He just said it was taken to Planning Commission. So, what exactly was taken to the Planning Commission?
The entire Chapter 23 of the zoning ordinance that we started discussing back in September 2016 that made it through at least one reading at this board and that we discussed at the February Board of Mayor and Alderman retreat. That's what was started. We used the term alcoholic beverage selling establishment, which created a significant amount of confusion. No changes were done to 23-763, and so we are currently looking at the best way to bring that back, and we'll take the whole process back through Planning Commission. But what's in front of you tonight is clearly in Chapter 3 of our ordinance, and no changes to the zoning code or anything that's allowed within that, which is clearly shown in 23-763-4 as to the retail uses that are allowed within the T4 district, and those are limited retail. We've discussed that limited retail and all retail. Doesn't matter what it's limited to, but all retail is limited to 5,000 square feet per block, so that linear 1,500 feet on the major road. And if we go back again to a major road, that's 80 to 160 feet wide. So that clearly limits the area and clearly puts that away from residentially zoned properties as a buffer. Also, just to clarify, the average size of a grocery store in Germantown, just approximate numbers, we're looking at over 50,000 square feet. If a retail food store has to, as it shows in your agenda sheet, have a retail floor space of 1,200 feet that is dedicated, and 20% of its sales dedicated to food and food ingredients. So there's multiple checks and balances. And finally, when you get back to the final part, and I apologize to Attorney Harris, but I feel like this needs to be clarified since it keeps going back to the zoning requirement. Alcoholic beverage and beer sales are also subject to approval pursuant to 377, 382, 3113, and 3116. So you, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, have the ultimate authority of who gets to sell alcohol where. But a restaurant is an allowed use. It doesn't have to serve alcohol. That's a business choice. But a restaurant is still not a bad transition from a residential area if someone wants to walk over and get a hamburger. It's your right as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to choose whether they get to have a beer with that hamburger or not.
Well, I think the problem with that, though, as we saw at the last BMA meeting, was that there are aldermen who have been advised that they should vote for these beer permits at the advice of council. Well, I'll let Alderman Owens explain himself because he is the one that said that, and he quoted former Alderman Drennan and said, at the advice of council, I'm going to vote yes for this beer permit. And so if we're going to continue to do that, then really giving us the right to deny beer permits when we don't have that right to deny a beer permit at the advice of council, it's really an illusion of some authority.
The Alderman, you asked for a point of clarification or a point of order, so you went a little bit long on that. We had Alderman Owens call the question, yielded the floor to Vice Mayor Gibson. So the question has been called for the motion to approve Ordinance 2017-6, amending the City of Germantown Alcoholic Beverage Ordinance on second reading and move to third reading. That's to call the question. Is there a second to call the question?
Second. Point of order.
Sure.
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
Made a motion to 3-114 to add to see the restriction 200 feet from another retail establishment.
At that point in time, you made a fairly long statement mentioning many different amendments. You never formally said, I make a motion to, and then list it. We have the question.
I did list it, Mayor.
I did not recognize that, and I didn't call for a second.
I'm happy to amend the motion to state that.
That'll be fine. Right now, it's calling the question. You can go back and then amend the motion. So the question means is that we can move to the actual item, and you can amend it if wished. So there's been a motion and a second to call the question. Please call the roll.
Alderman Massey?
No.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barziza?
No.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes. Calling the question fails. It takes a 2/3 vote. So we're back to, is there a motion to approve Ordinance 2017-6, amending the City of Germantown Alcoholic Beverage Ordinance on second reading? And the floor is open for amendments.
I make the motion on 3-114 to add the restriction 200 feet from another retail establishment.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion, a second on an amendment. Let's take roll on the.
We need a clarification on what a retail establishment
Right,
is.
Alderman.
Liquor store.
Well, Alderman Barziza, that was the point I was going to make. The defined term is capital R retailer.
Retailers.
And so what I wrote down, I believe on my suggested motion, had that capital R retailer.
Okay, capital R retailer
All right.
is what I.
I think we all.
Does the clerk have that?
No, sir.
To
have it written down.
rephrase my motion, and it is on 3-114 to add within 200 feet of any other retailer.
Let me add to that your motion to amend is to section 3-114C.
C.
The words, or within 200 feet of any other capital R retailer.
Right.
Period.
Correct.
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
It's been properly seconded. This is to vote on the amendment. Call the roll.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barziza?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gibson?
Yes.
Alderman Massey?
Yes.
It passes. We have to go back to the original motion, or that was amended?
Yeah, that was just to amend the motion. It's now been amended, and we've added the language that was recited.
Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 2017-6, amending the
I have
city?
a motion to amend.
I have the floor right now, Alderman, so one moment. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 2017-6, amending the City of Germantown Alcoholic Beverage Ordinance on second reading as amended?
So moved.
So motion.
Second.
And a second. Please call the roll.
Alderman Yonda?
Yes.
Alderman Barziza.
Question. Before I make, give my vote, if I vote for this or vote no, will it eliminate the amendment that I just made?
Oh, you're voting on the amendment that you just made?
No, we already voted on that.
We already voted on that. We're voting on the original.
Oh, you're to the original motion. Okay.
No, won't affect it.
Well, okay, before you includes the amendment that you have made. And you may be about to suggest another amendment. Is that what you're thinking?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, then you can vote for it as before you.
Okay, now my question to you is, if I vote no, would that nullify my amendment? If
No,
everybody voted
not
no?
your vote. It would be a 3-2. I mean,
Gotcha.
it might not be 3-2. It would require a majority vote to approve what's before us.
Because I have a problem with the T4 comments that have been made from the public and the people, especially the people here tonight, I'm going to vote no.
Vice Mayor Gibson.
Yes.
Alderman Massey.
No.
Alderman Owens.
Yes.
The motion passes, and please keep in mind, Board, this moves it to third and final reading only, so there's another opportunity to have more discussion as well.
Clarification. Did I vote yes?
You let off, yes. We've reached the conclusion of our meeting this evening. I want to thank our officers tonight, Al, Eric, and Ed, for standing with us this evening. We are adjourned.